A Qantas Airbus A380 suffered an uncontained engine failure after departing Singapore Changi Airport on 4 November 2010. Despite the odds, the pilots successfully landed the jet and all passengers and crew departed safely. VHOQA is now in California, intending to return to duty in the near future. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of the hero pilot who saved the flight and everyone on board. But what are the main causes of A380's uncontained engine failure? VHOQA was Qantas's first Airbus A380 and was given the name after pioneering female aviator Nancy Bird Walton. She was also known as the Angel of the Outback because she was the youngest Australian woman to obtain a pilot's license. Her namesake aircraft was involved in an uncontained engine failure just a year after her death. QF-32, IATA flight number, was a daily flight from London to Sydney via Singapore. VHOQA took off according to schedule from Singapore's Changi Airport on its way to Sydney on November 4, 2010. According to the Aviation Health and Safety Network, the Super Jumbo was fully filled, with 440 passengers and 29 crew members on board. The A380 experienced an uncontained engine breakdown 4 minutes into the flight. Shrapnel from the number 2 engine damaged a section of the wing, causing damage to the fuel system and leaks. A fuel tank fire was started as a result of these leaks. Not only that, but damage to the hydraulic system and anti-lock brake system forced 2 more engines to enter degraded state. This, along with damage to the landing flaps and engine controls, rendered the plane highly uncontrolled. To analyze the problem, the flying crew entered a holding pattern. What were the challenging circumstances? They had to land the world's largest commercial passenger plane, which was 50 tons over its maximum landing weight, with fewer controls than they were used to. After nearly 2 hours of holding, the crew members attempted to land, and Nancy Bird Walton landed hard and fast. Heavy braking caused 4 of the tires to blow out, but the plane came to a stop with plenty of runway left. Although the passengers and crew were relieved to be back on the ground, the situation was far from done. Fuel was flowing onto the scorching brakes, and the number 1 engine couldn't be turned off. The fire department was forced to douse the engine on the ground until flameout was accomplished. The risk of fire was considerable, and the cabin crew was ready to evacuate the passengers through an emergency slide. Fortunately, this was not necessary in the end. Pilot David Evans explained the situation to the Royal Aeronautical Society. "We're in a situation where there's fuel, hot brakes, and an engine we can't turn off. And, until things changed, the safest place to be was on board the aircraft. So the cabin staff was on high alert the entire time, ready to evacuate, open doors, and inflate slides at any time. That danger faded with time, and we were fortunate enough to get everyone off very gently and carefully through one set of steps." The uncontained engine breakdown hurled debris onto buildings and cars on the Indonesian island of Batam. Luckily, no one was injured. VHOQA Airbus A380 getting back into service. A turbine disc in the engine had cracked as a result of a poorly built stub oil pipe, according to an inspection. Qantas and Singapore Airlines both grounded their A380s until the engines were thoroughly inspected. Some of the engines were replaced, while others had fixes performed to prevent the defect from reoccurring. In April 2012, VHOQA was repaired and returned to service. In reality, this aircraft was the first Qantas A380 to return with a rebuilt cabin and the new first-class offering in late 2019. During the unusual drop in travel demand over the previous 3 years, the airplane has been resting its wings in the California sun. However, the Australian flag carrier has recently begun reintroducing its A380s. Captain Richard Champion de Crespini of Qantas was at the pilot's wheel of Nancy Bird Walton. He is credited with helping the plane land safely after the events of QF-32, as well as saving the passengers on board. However, it appears that his career ended prematurely. Indeed, just days before the 10th anniversary of the near disaster, in late 2020, De Crespini announced his departure from Qantas. This turned out to be a direct result of the present international travel decline. In an interview with the Australian journal Traveller, he stated, "COVID-19 has terminated my 45-year professional flying career. I am currently standing down and am in limbo, not having flown since March, and will take early retirement effective November 30th, 2020. Despite the fact that D. Crispini's flying days are finished, his accomplishments have not gone unnoticed. QF32, his book about that terrible day, became a bestseller in 2012. In 2018, the book Fly: Life Lessons from the Cockpit of QF32 was launched. In normal conditions, he travels the world, addressing resilient subjects to various governments and corporations. On the other hand, here is one more Air France Airbus A380 engine explosion. Air France Flight 66 was flying from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport to Los Angeles International Airport on September 30th, 2017. The Airbus A380, on the other hand, experienced an uncontained engine failure. As a result, it was forced to make an emergency landing at Goose Bay Airport in Canada. According to a report released by the Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, BEA, the failure was caused by a lack of scientific knowledge about the alloy used in the plane's engine parts. When the tragedy occurred 3 years ago, registration FHPJE was carrying 497 passengers and 24 members of Air France's staff. After 5 hours of being in the air, the aircraft's engine number 4 failed with an explosion. This happened approximately 150 kilometers, 90 miles, southeast of Pamiut, Greenland. During the event, there were no reported fatalities. According to Aerotime, examiners discovered that the first rotating fan assembly at the front of an engine and the air inlet, as well as the fan housing, had split in mid-flight. The Super Jumbo suffered minimal structural damage as a result of this. Investigators have spent the last 21 months piecing together all of the facts. Following the event, the BEA started a 3-phase search to collect the scattered engine pieces. Before the components could be recovered, extensive optical scanning and aerial radar campaigns were conducted to detect them using synthetic aperture radars, SAR, and ground-penetrating radars, GPR. Notably, this was the second uncontained engine failure experienced by an A380. Previously, a Rolls-Royce Trent 900 engine malfunctioned on a Qantas flight in 2010. Let's understand the A380 engine flaw science was not aware of. Engine Alliance, a joint venture of General Electric and Pratt & Whitney, created the GP7-200 engine out of titanium alloy Ti-64. The French authorities' investigation, issued on September 25, 2020, explicitly stated that the incident was not the responsibility of the engine manufacturer or Airbus. The scientific world was not aware of Ti-64 titanium alloy's vulnerability to cold dwell fatigue at the time. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, metal alloys used in aviation engines are frequently anticipated to operate at temperatures beyond 300 degrees Celsius, 572 degrees Fahrenheit. However, if the motor operates at a lower temperature, it becomes prone to cold dwell fatigue, reducing the projected engine cycles to failure dramatically. In the case of the Air France A380, the engine broke after 3,544 flight cycles, despite the fact that the titanium part's anticipated minimum life was 15,000 cycles. For about 40 years, scientists have been aware of the cold dwell fatigue phenomenon in various titanium alloys, such as IMI 685 or TI 6242. Nonetheless, the BEA assessment said that the TI 64 was not considered sensitive to cold dwell fatigue until the failure of the GP7270 engine number 4 fan hub. According to the findings, the European Union Aviation Safety Authority, ESA, and the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, should alter the design, sizing, and manufacturing guidelines for Ti-64 alloy engine components. BEA also advised both authorities to implement a new in-service inspection program to detect any signs of cold dwell fatigue in the same alloy engines. What are your thoughts about Air France's Airbus A380 and Qantas A380 uncontained engine failure?